Melanie Herring, PurpleKeclion, GlitchedPuppet, Papaya Kitty, whichever alias you're familiar with, is a furry webcomic artist. She's dabbled in lewd furry content since around 2005, a majority being Pokemon and Sonic, as well as a few contributions to Cub magazines. She finds herself in the center of a polyamorous relationship, as well as labeling herself as a non-binary asexual, something she openly publicizes. At the core of this artist, one could say that a rather vicious narcissist can be found. She has created several lengthy callouts and threads on people she happens to have fallouts with, a number of them being posted on her Tumblr and Twitter. Most of these callouts are usually documents that can reach double-digit page numbers. Along with this, she would make chat rooms and servers dedicated to bullying these individuals, somewhat similar to a cult. She's admitted to a multitude of fetishes, some coming from her page while others appear to be rumors floating around a few furry circles. We will be covering as much of these as we're able to, but for now, let's begin our session with the PurpleKeclian era. PurpleKecleon was rather active on Awake boards, as well as Fur Affinity. However, she gained her rise in status by being the admin of a group titled Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers on DeviantArt, which she ran along with Marl and Evie. Two people we'll also be looking into during this session. Now, this group was promoted as being a family-friendly Pokemon roleplay group. However, the group would rather quickly turn into a cove for PK's lust-driven content, multiple layers of drama beginning to grow inside. Here, you could stumble upon multiple characters getting R-worded, PK and Marl rigging their own contests so their sock puppet account will win it, as well as PK's alleged Mary Sue Sona getting frisky with an underage character. She would also trick users to go off the site and over to her Not Safe for Work Tumblr blog, most times to read more of the excerpts posted on her artwork on DeviantArt. Now, you may recall the callout post I mentioned previously. Her time on DeviantArt wasn't exactly void of these. Nearing the end of this group, PK had a fallout with another admin by the name of Mike, or Mike Mander. From the looks of the over 4,800 word document, it appeared to be petty moments between the two that led to them butting heads. However, it seems that wasn't enough to stop PK from uploading the document and sending her fans over to dogpile on Mike. There was also the feud she had with Pommy N64, or as most people know him as, Sean Chiplock. It's a rather odd deal, but from what I could gather, it would seem that PK claimed that Sean was attempting to dox her so that someone could harass her and kill her animals. It's a rather crazy ordeal, but I do recommend checking the links below if you'd like to read through and try to make sense of it past my little TLDR. But this marks the end of her DeviantArt controversy. The only issue is, this isn't where this part ends. With the DeviantArt group coming apart and disbanding, Melanie and her husband would leave to pour their efforts into an original project by the name of Floriverse. This project came to light on September 19th, 2013, 2 days after the sudden shutdown of PMD Explorers. The comic was presented as open source, encouraging fans to submit their content and quite possibly have it become canon. I say possibly because a majority of it went unused. A species creation contest in December 2015 was the last community concern event that took place surrounding the comic. After this event, the only way to add a character to the official canon of Floriverse has been through a $100 Patreon pledge. In a similar fashion to PMD Explorers, Floriverse also has a lewd counterpart to its content under the name Forbidden Flora. The segregation of content is a wise decision, if it weren't for the fact that the stories in Forbidden Flora contain content relevant to the main plot of Floriverse, meaning that it's necessary to read this pornographic content to understand the full story of it all. A greatly worrying fact when the comic's many underage fans come into thought. The authors themselves are more than aware of this, yet don't make any attempts to prevent minors from accessing this adult-oriented content. And speaking of the plot of Floriverse is as follows. A bird and a blob are on a journey to deliver some seeds. After some time, they end up in a land known as Hellside. The importance of these seeds is never really mentioned in the story. However, there is also the fact that the original Floriverse story from 2013 never really ended. Throughout the story, several omnipotent beings tell the protagonists that they'll find out why these seeds are so important soon. The issue being that it's never really told or shown why. At this point, the main plot never really advances, most of the content being smaller episodes that take place in the universe. which leads the story to become more and more confusing as you're shown one unsolved plot arc and one one-shot character after another. Then came the release of Try Again. They attempt to use an interactive style to present the story, but it appears to have resulted in most people having to voice their confusion with the content. Odd enough, Seeds, a mini-story, ran for roughly 2 years, with the sequel War is Hell starting a year later. The chapters for this sequel can be a tad bit intimidating to new readers. In order, we have Prologue 5-1, Chapter 5 Draft 5, Chapter 5 Draft 6, Prologue 5-2, and Chapter ? This ordering has the possibility to add on to any confusion the reader may experience. And by Chapter ? One could ask if PK even knew what was going on anymore. In my opinion, this comic is along the lines of a furry Homestuck story-wise. I'm sure I can manage to understand what's going on, but what the hell is even going on? Getting back to Melanie, this is around the time she started to become more active on Tumblr. During this time, she would go on to identify as non-binary, as well as expressing hatred for all things male. The latter bleeds into the canon of Floriverse, shown by PK vowing to make the default gender of the comic female, upon other things. She also talked about her consideration of importing an illegal drug to enlarge a certain portion of her body, as well as lamenting about her inability to become a gynomorph. Something else to take note of would be her sex guru persona, where she gives anyone on Tumblr willing to ask advice on how to uncover their sexual identity. Even minors. Along with these less than stellar points, she would still go on to have a multitude of drama and squabbles with others. First here, PK and her boyfriend Evie went after Steven Universe writer Matt Burnett due to a consistency issue with the show. You see, in one episode, Pearl says something about liking pie, but in another, saying that she can't stand the thought of eating. The two would then go on to start a needless squabble over his explanation, to the point that the writer would leave Tumblr because of the flack it got them. PK and Evie came out seemingly unscathed because cats, I guess. Next, we move over to YouTube, where PK and YouTuber Jwits would have their slice of drama. Now, this is a small issue compared to even the Steven Universe thing. The deal here was that PK decided to flag a video made by Jwits due to her art being in the video, for a solid 3 seconds of screen time. Using an artist's artwork without proper credit or permission is a cause for concern, definitely. With the amount of time and effort most art pieces have in them, crediting the artist responsible is the bare minimum you could do. That being said, PK copyright claimed his video due to not being credited for the 3 seconds her artwork was presented. She went on to Tumblr to answer fans who had a problem with the way she was handling the situation. The first one is a person who believed she was handling the situation immaturely, saying how they understood their frustration, but they were villainizing Jwits for what was essentially a small slip-up. This was met with a somewhat aggressive reply, claiming that the person was attempting to victim blame them. They even mentioned the gist of the situation. He was in the wrong for not crediting the artist, and the two of them were working on a positive solution. However, this is behind the insults being slung left and right. Surely it would have made sense to simply broadcast that the two of you were communicating about the issue and say, a text or photo post? You know, rather than in between calling people names on the internet. I suppose that's too much to do, but that's all that seems to have surfaced from that issue. Next up, we have an issue concerning her polyamorous relationship that went public. During this time, PK was together with her husband Marl and her boyfriend Evie. Now, Marl had banged someone without telling PK, so naturally she threw the private matter into the public on her Tumblr. Even the part where Evie wanted to do the same thing without PK's permission. In anger, she would go on to draw art of her persona decapitating Marl and Evie's characters for their merch store. Following this, the supposed two offenders would go on to ask PK for forgiveness, and the assumption was made that she accepted. And the cherry on top of all of this, on top of every controversy, squabble, and call-out essay she's been involved in or instigated, PK would make a comic to cover the topic of how toxic call-out culture can be. This isn't a strike against her or anything. I welcome people denouncing toxic rallying against someone, so long as it isn't based on substantial evidence. When you have supposed deplorable after deplorable start to pile up, it does start to become a problem that should get some kind of notice or solution. And speaking of supposed deplorables, an ex by the name of Pengo Sullivan called out PK on Tumblr. accusing her of being emotionally abusive in their relationship. These allegations are only based on Pingo's word alone, and as of recent, Pingo's Tumblr page has simply become her more current statement on the matter, saying that the two have talked things over and worked it out. The part of this that got attention was brought to the testimonials that she received upon coming out. A handful of these testimonies say that PK's husband Marl is a zoophile who supposedly carried out the act. Multiple people came out with allegations that Marl slipped into the DMs of some people, one mentioning a website furries use for casual hookups, and would ask them to screw his male dog. Eventually, Marl would catch word of these allegations, and almost immediately, he and PK threatened Pingo Sullivan with a lawsuit. Pingo would then take all of this down, but Marl would confirm that he is into zoophilia, but didn't want this dragged into the public, as well as denying pressuring people into the acts he was accused of. Now we move over to 2015, when a person named Lane made a post on Kiwi Farms saying that Marl had attempted to groom her at the age of 13, to screw him and his dog in a Floriverse chat room. Now, the accusation didn't have any logs or receipts to back it up, but it was met with PK saying how fed up she was about people lying about her, Evie's response, which would not load for me despite being archived, and Marl responding with a rant about harassment, in which he denies it happening. PK had gone on to insist that she was 100% sure that nothing happened between these two, and that Lane was a liar. Her method of doing so involved attempts to portray Lynn as an underage temptress, going undercover for the FBI to get older men in trouble with the law. A bit of exaggeration on my part, but it's not too far from what PK seemed to be getting at. No logs or receipts were provided with these claims. However, unlike Lane, PK claimed they had these logs and will provide them, something she never went on to do. Amid the controversies surrounding PK and her associates, she decided that now would be the best time to rebrand herself, changing her handle from PurpleKeclian to GlitchedPuppet. With this name change came more of the usual. GlitchedPuppet, or Glip, would continue to publish not safe for work comics about the dreaded R-word, zoophilia, and underage characters. Many have told her to properly tag and hide her sexual content, however, she simply ignored this and left this out for anyone to see. A tad bit concerning, especially when paired with Glip's statement about wanting kids to read it secretly and discover that they're gay or trans. They explain this message by saying that their porn isn't exploitative, and that the underage should use her not safe for work account as a guide to finding their gender or sexuality. This is around the time the Floriverse trio was more active on Discord. At first, it was made to discuss her webcomic, but the discussions quickly moved over to how misgendering someone, even if unintentional, is violence. Hey Alexa, what is violence?
Assume my gender, and I will put your fat ass in the ground, cis scum. Who do you think you are to
Okay. And speaking of the trio, let's get back to Marl. I'm sure you recall the allegations of Marl contacting people in hopes of getting them to pork his male dog. I'm also sure you remember the allegations of Marl attempting to groom a 13-year-old. The next allegation just combines the two, and where Lane lacked any kind of receipt to support the claim she made, this allegation came with a rather damning and taxing receipt. To give you a summary of the content, in 2018, logs were leaked that Marl was attempting to groom a minor, going by Big Fluff, into porking him and his dog. The logs even show that Marl is fully aware of Big Fluff being a minor, and yet he sent her a nude, his zoophile listing where he pimps out his dog, and said how he could introduce her to his escort friend if she was interested in an escort gig. Now, a real-life meetup was arranged between both of them, where Big Fluff helped him out in the Floriverse merch store. During this meetup to the Floriverse trio's home in Vegas, it would seem she ran into PK in the nude. Marl even confirms that PK didn't care about her age at all. However, this was just a business visit. After this, Marl would continue to message Big Fluff, asking for her to visit again so they could finally do the do. He would brag about bad dragon toys he had and his fascination with seeing girls attempt to use his toys. Something you probably shouldn't tell a minor, but that's just my opinion. The logs are a pretty odd conversation to go through, but they did end up getting dumped onto the official Floriverse Discord server. And when met with this, Marl confessed through a moderator that these conversations he was having were true, but he had no ill intent during them. Now, the backlash this got was so huge that the moderator who first delivered Marl's confession backpedaled into saying that the logs were fabricated, because they came from kiwi farms. Even with the attempted takeback, these logs spread like a gender reveal party's aftermath across Tumblr and Twitter. And if that wasn't enough, another ex of Melanie tweeted about Marl trying to get her porked by a dog. The full-on calamity of events had resulted in the end of 2 business ventures concerning Floriverse. The comic was removed from the Hiveworks website, and ESC Toys ended their toy campaign for the comic. We're now 2 days in after the release of this incriminating receipt, and it would appear Melanie announced that she was taking a break from the internet due to false allegations growing to an unbearable amount, just before locking her Twitter account. She firmly stated that these logs were false, and this was simply a part of a harassment campaign against the 3 of them. Evie believes the logs were edited, however, no member of the trio provided proof or really anything that could have painted the trio as innocent. And since we're on the topic of innocence, I want to take a quick poll. If you were being bombarded with allegations of zoophilia, and you were ultimately and completely innocent, would you A, put your home up for sale and flee the state, or B, look back at A because this is what the trio did? They sold their home and fled the state to live with Marl's parents in Arkansas. It may just be me who finds this a bit funny, since according to the listing, this all happened while they resided in Vegas. And what happened in Vegas definitely didn't stay in Vegas, that's for sure. Now, eventually this group would end up breaking their silence from this internet break. Evie would do so with a Patreon blog post, where he goes on to say that Kiwi Farms ruined Floriverse and all their other projects. The logs were false, and backing this up with a false tweet from Obama. It reads like most posts denouncing cancel culture, but there lies the problem. I'm not a fan of cancel culture myself. It can shoot creators who have done nothing wrong dead in a matter of seconds. The keyword in there being nothing wrong. If you've done something that wasn't too acceptable, then yeah, you deserve to get criticized for it. And in the case of this trio, it's just mistakes on top of mistakes that they refuse to recognize. The denial of Marl pimping his dog out to multiple people, among many other things, just kept building to the point where it just toppled over and developed into this shitstorm. At a certain point, it just becomes way too much to make up for, and that becomes your reputation. That's just how the internet's been. Now, months after these allegations were first made, the GlitchedPuppet Twitter became active again. One of her first posts being photos of her new designer cat. Now we fast forward to July 2018. On the 22nd, Melanie would announce that after months of silence, she would be divorcing Marl. She would also publish an apology that was allegedly composed by Marl. In this apology, he confesses that he is a zoophile, but only in fantasy, as well as saying that the logs were edited to make him look worse than he is. Now, some are suspicious of this apology due to the fact of how it captures Melanie as the one true victim of his crimes. I mean, it only mentions her a total of 27 times. It also went on to say how she was completely unaware of his zoophilic fantasies. It will later be leaked that it was the opposite case, that she was fully aware of the dog porking. When people made note of her inconsistencies in 2020, Melanie would then backpedal to edit the apology, this time with commentary. And to add to the suspicious nature of their actions, the trio would go on to change their legal names. Melanie was now Ash Hazel Woods, Marl was Lycus Argent Woods, and Evie Evelyn Clover Woods. With this, Melanie and Evie would officially move to Colorado, while Marl was left behind in Arkansas. Even though she divorced Marl, Melanie still claimed that Big Fluff and Lane were both liars, and that she was the only victim of Marl. She said Marl was the only predator under her roof, despite her refusal to come in contact with the police. She continued to claim that she had facts, but instead says that everyone making allegations is wrong, and not giving factual evidence that would disprove the claims the logs made. If you've been noticing the downward spiral this has been taking, I'm sure you can expect that this is truly where things start to go off the deep end. An important note to make is that Melanie has been known to use her story of being a childhood abuse victim to escape accountability. This first happened all the way back when she saw that people felt bad for Mike Mander. Since it worked and got people to pity her, she began to use it almost as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Although the situation surrounding her and Mike had nothing to do with child abuse. It is also said that the child abuse story was something that actually happened to her sibling. Despite the claim that she found CP in her dad's computer, Melanie does have a history of drawing lewd underage material throughout her career. When this contradiction got pointed out, she regarded her drawing of CP as a coping mechanism. One may start to question this after seeing her reaction, as well as fan art she drew of a non-consensual CP Pokemon fanfiction between an underage N and his father Gethsis. Jesus Christ. During this time, it wasn't very uncommon for Melanie's statements to contradict one another. She would bring up how Lane said that she was 13 in her chat room, and later saying that Lane never disclosed her age. She'd insist that they never had minors in her home, just before mentioning that Big Fluff visited their home in Vegas. In 2015, Melanie said that the accusations of Marl being a zoophile and grooming minors were lies, and part of a harassment campaign. Skip a few months ahead, she now claims that she had no clue in the slightest, all the while telling her Patreon that most of the claims were fabricated. She would then claim that she knew about Marl's zoo fantasies, but didn't know he would act on them. And in 2019, Melanie still insisted publicly that she was 100% unaware that Marl screwed pooches. This would be disproven via Discord leak, confirming that she knew it all along. And now in the year 2020, Melanie's story changes again. This time in the style of a 116-page apology, detailing how she knew Marl porked dogs, and also that he allegedly made her screw a Great Dane. Also happening in 2020, a past PMD moderator named iRudy spoke up about sending nudes to Marl when she was just a teenager. She moved in with Melanie shortly after this, when she was only 18. Melanie claimed that she was keeping her safe from an abusive household. However, she goes on to create another contradiction, admitting that she demanded Marl to not hit on iRudy, almost as if she was fully aware of Marl's tendencies. But that's getting into speculation territory. I'm just here to give you the baseline information. Information such as the allegation that Marl asked iRudy to screw his dog. Now, the dog was rehomed shortly afterward, although the recollection of homing differs from who you asked. From iRudy, she says she heard crying, presumably from Eevee as Marl and Glip consoled them. The next day, Apollo was gone, and Marl told her that the dog had been taken to the vet. On Melanie's side, she says that she didn't know who Marl gave Apollo to, but she hopes it wasn't just another zoophile. Marl didn't tell her or Eevee about it, and Apollo was just suddenly gone. And Eevee says that they had no clue what happened until Melanie told them that Apollo had been rehomed by Marl. Now we come to some more recent events. Apart from Floriverse's lore and relevancy, Melanie and Eevee would go on to create a game named Cherry Kisses and get it published on Steam. It's an adult visual novel where the character you play runs a not safe for work shop, where the goal is essentially to talk to people who come in. One of the cast being a minor who repeatedly keeps sneaking in against the storekeeper's wishes. I have played it myself since it is free on itch, and from what I played, there's no minor sexualization, so it does pass the bottom bar, although there is something a bit unsettling about that, seeing as our main character is in the nude at all times. So it just sort of exists. Dialogue's kind of odd, 4 out of 10. Doki Doki Adult Shop aside, the Floriverse Discord server had actually gotten remade. This time, however, its purpose was to be Melanie's therapy tool for her fans. It's said that she uses attack therapy through a ritual in which she calls a scene. There are unfiltered logs of this server saved, but on top of the triple-digit page apology, my brain is fried from reading through a hefty chunk of it. I'll be linking it down below for those who have time to look through all of it. For me, however, this seems to be a good place to end this video off. I wish there was some positive to properly wrap this up, but there isn't. At least nothing made public yet. When I call this a downward spiral, that's almost verbatim what this comes to. From a Pokemon comic based off a D&D session, to a moderator being molded by her server, to divorce his abusive wife, and end up losing custody of his child. Looking through the logs is probably for the best, but not my call to make. There is some information about Eevee or Evelyn that I came across, but it feels somewhat out of place, so I may give that its own video. But on another note, what are your thoughts about all this information that we covered here? If there's something you want me to look into next, be sure to leave it down in the comments below or message me over on my socials and I'll be sure to give them a read. If you're new, consider hitting that sub button if you're interested in odd internet crap like I happen to be, and I'll see you next video.